right, so we are live. I'm going to give it just a minute to let some people jump on with us.
Sure.
All right, I will go, excuse me, I'll go ahead and get started.
Sure.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome to another live broadcast. I'm Jamie Chavez, your host with the Westminster Chamber of Commerce, and we are thrilled to have you with us today. Usually Mondays are intended to bring you the latest insights from City Hall, but today we have a special guest, Kelly Sloan, who is our Westminster Chamber lobbyist with us to give you an update on everything going down at the Capitol. If this is your first time joining us, welcome. We're glad to have you here. If you're on Facebook, you can like or follow us to make sure that you get the notifications when we go live in the future. And if you're on YouTube, you can hit subscribe and check out our previous broadcasts there. On Wednesdays, same time, same place, we offer a chance to meet the newest members of the Chamber and learn more about their businesses. So I encourage you to join us for those broadcasts as well. And we also reserve the last Friday of the month for county updates featuring Jeffco County Commissioner Tracy Kraft Tharp. So stay tuned for those to be informed on broader county matters. As you watch this broadcast this morning, please feel free to engage with us. Don't be shy, drop your comments, ask questions, or simply say hello. Especially with Kelly here with us today, we're excited to get some of those questions answered. So feel free to post those and we'll address them during the interview. And now finally, a warm welcome to Kelly Sloan. Thank you so much for joining us today. How are you?
I'm doing well. Thanks for having me.
Good. We've got a couple people saying hello. Hi, Brian. Good morning. And hello, Dave. Good morning.
Hi, Dave.
Thanks for joining us. So can you provide maybe just an overview to start off an overview of your role as a lobbyist for the Chamber and how you advocate for the best interests of our businesses?
Sure. So basically, as a lobbyist or government relations professional, however you want to put it, I'm the Chamber's representative down at the state capitol. I'm down there every day, so I'm kind of your eyes and ears on the ground. So it involves a number of things: watching bills as bills become introduced, having a look at them, seeing if they could potentially have some impact on the Chamber or any of our members, and then reporting them back to you on bills that we decide to take a position on that we've discussed with the Chamber. Then I go ahead and work on those either to oppose or to support, or even just to watch, see if there's sometimes a lot we just want to amend. That they're not a bad bill, they're not a great bill. If you made a couple changes, then we might have a good bill. So those are some things we do down there. Obviously, engaging with members in both the House and the Senate and in the governor's office, making those relationships. Obviously, we have a great relationship as a chamber, and myself as your representative with our local representatives, Senator Zenzinger and Representative Byrd. But building, those other relationships with committee members, particularly, committee members of the business committee or some of the other committees that impact business, finance committee, that kind of thing. And really all the members, they all have a vote down there, and every vote counts. And that's a big part of the job, is just making those relationships, letting people know down there what our chamber does, what we care about, what issues we care about, why we care about them, and how what happens down in that building impacts business interests in some of these communities like Westminster. So that's essentially what I do. As I said, I'm your eyes and ears on the ground at the state capitol and your representative. So like Jamie said, if there's anything, if there's a bill any of you as members come across that has a little more specific interest to you, a little more esoteric interest, let me know, and I'd be happy to either provide information on it. And that's another part of my job too, isn't just going down there and fighting the good fight for or against legislation, but just letting you know what is involved in that legislation. Sometimes the titles can be a little vague, and there's at times where something looks like, my goodness, this could be horrible. This could be the end of the world. And really, when you dig into it, it's not. Or vice versa. That okay, that sounds okay, and then you dig into it, and it's potentially
the end of the world.
Yeah. So that's a big part of my job as well.
Okay, great. And how do you go about building those relationships with state lawmakers and policymakers to effectively advocate for chamber members?
Really just being down there and talking to them and interacting with them, making introductions to the new members. Of course, we're a term limit state, so there's a fair amount of turnover, every 4 years. This year, well over half of the state house is new, partly because of term limits, partly because of resignations. For one reason or another, we had a number of people that went to the new mayor's office in Denver. We had a number of resignations just because of the mostly new members that weren't quite used to the I guess how vitriolic, sorry, it can get down there. And then of course members leaving after they're termed out. So introducing yourself to new members, sometimes going to some of their functions in the community, but mostly it's just going down there, talking to them, introducing yourself, and they'll want it. Most of them want to talk about their bills or their legislation. That's what they're down there for. Even the ones that may not be, I guess, ideologically predisposed to align themselves with business interests, just by dint of being down there, they do want to have those discussions. Most of them, and that's part of our job as lobbyists, is to start those discussions and have them with them. And there are times when they learn something new that they didn't know about a particular industry or business in general. So they can't be expected to be experts on everything, and they know that.
Yeah.
And if they didn't know that, they find out pretty quick once they get down there that there's they're covering a lot of different issues: healthcare, general business, regulatory, energy, education, you name it. There's such a vast range of what the legislature covers, and they really do look to people like us to tell them and to help inform them of what some of these issues are and how they relate at the ground level.
Yeah, absolutely. And can you maybe go into some of those challenges or obstacles that we're facing right now in pro-business policies at the state level?
Yeah, so there's a number of bills that we're looking at that we have some concerns with, that we're taking an active role on. One of the first was House Bill 1008, wage claims regarding the construction industry. It's a bill that's ostensibly aimed at wage theft, which of course is I think all business owners see that as a breach of contract if you don't pay your workers. What this bill does, however, is kind of expand that idea of freedom of contract, specifically for the construction industry this year. And what it's saying is, if you're a general contractor, you've hired a subcontractor, and that subcontractor hires some people, and the subcontractor or a subcontractor has a wage dispute, doesn't pay their people, then the general contractor is jointly and severably liable for that. So again, if I was a general contractor, well, let's say Jamie was the general contractor, she hired me, and I didn't pay my workers, then it's on Jamie. She may not even know who I hired or that I subcontracted somebody else, but the onus is being brought on her. There's a number of problems with this, obviously, that the general contractor, like I mentioned, doesn't always know who's being employed down the line, but also kind of gives cover to the bad actors down there. If I'm a bad actor, I don't pay my people, well, I'm pretty much off scot-free, because now it's all being put on the general contractor. The other concern with this is it's directed specifically at the construction industry this year, but the bill sponsors have already said that they want to expand this to all other industries, restaurant, you name it. And we're seeing a lot of bills like that are kind of starting with one specific area, but their intent is to expand this in the next year or two. So that's one we're working on. That one is, it did pass the House committee. It's in appropriations, and of course, Representative Byrd our Representative Byrd is chair of appropriations, and we're in discussions with her about either seeking some amendments. The construction industry is looking for, or to perhaps even kill it. So that's one we're working on. Another one we're working on is House Bill 1014. It's a consumer protection bill that wants to eliminate the significant harm standard. A couple years ago, there was a bill to amend the Consumer Protection Act, and the courts subsequently determined that you can only make some of these claims for litigation if there's been a substantial community harm done. So it can't just be one person. There has to be some public harm have been done by some of these consumer protection claims. What this bill does is statutorily reverses this and says it doesn't have to be a wider claim. Obviously, this is going to put a huge burden on employers and businesses who are now going to be liable for a lot more, kind of probably a deluge of consumer protection complaints, many of which could be frivolous if they're not having that larger impact. That's when it passed the House. It's in the Senate. We think we can probably make some pretty good progress in the Senate. It's in a committee that I'm going to say we're cautiously optimistic that we can get it killed in Senate Judiciary. So we're working on that. There's a business coalition put together that the Westminster Chamber is part of, and we're working pretty diligently on that one as well. There's been a number of oil and gas bills recently that just got introduced. Now I know Westminster is not a major oil and gas producing area, but obviously energy production impacts the state as a whole, and we have a lot of energy related businesses and jobs coming out of Westminster and out of our region. And you've probably watched over the last few years that there's been a number of bills that have been and regulatory efforts as well, that have been kind of aimed at oil and gas and have really tamped down the industry in the state. A couple of these bills would, and I don't think it's too hyperbolic to say, would be kind of a death knell. One for sure, Senate Bill 159, is essentially a ban on oil and gas production. It calls for an end to permitting. No more, basically saying no more oil and gas permits. 165 would put a seasonal pause on pre-production oil and gas activities. And House Bill 1330 would add layers and layers of new regulations and kind of complex requirements for obtaining air quality permits and other environmental permits. The idea being to basically kind of bury oil and gas permitting in the permitting process, so you can actually get the permits and and essentially strike the killing blow to oil and gas. Obviously, and just in terms of jobs and revenue to the state and to local governments, this could be a huge issue. Not only what it could potentially do to energy prices. So that's a state chamber priority as well. Those three bills, and we're working closely, as we do with a lot of these business issues. We're working closely with other chambers, and in particular the state chamber. I go to the state chamber's various legislative councils to keep up to date on different bills that are being introduced and what the state chamber's position is, and to relate our position to the state chamber. Sometimes there's some divergence there. So, but this is one, I think the entire business, or three, that the entire business community, in fact, all the ones we've mentioned so far are ones where there's a lot of unity within the wider business community to oppose. Another one that's out there, shifting to more the housing sector now, is House Bill 1175. You may recall last year there was a bill that gave local governments right of first refusal for sales of multifamily property, to allow those local governments to convert them into affordable housing. That bill did die. It's back, and it's another one that we're opposing. A lot of the housing community, a lot of the development community is opposing. It does include a right of first offer, which, if that was all the bill was, I think a lot of the groups would be okay with that. But it does include a right of first refusal for some of these properties, and a lot of the properties that it's imposing the right of first refusal on, or even for the right of first offer, are properties that really aren't appropriate for converting to low-income housing. So we feel that's going to distort the housing market, and it's what we intend to oppose. Another one I'll mention really briefly in that kind of that realm is 1313, transit-oriented communities. More details coming out about this one, but we heard some concerns from local governments that this is more of a cudgel, not even a stick. It's a pretty big stick as opposed to a carrot. There's no incentives for communities to kind of build around transit and to qualify for the transit-oriented community designation. And if they don't meet all of the state's requirements, then their HETF funding is put at risk. So that's a pretty big stick, and it's digging pretty deep into issues of local control and local zoning, which the chamber, as always, taking kind of the view that a lot of these decisions ought to be, especially in zoning, ought to be made locally. There are things that should be preempted at state level, but zoning decisions certainly ought to stay at the local level, and anything to help with development and that kind of thing. There's a number of healthcare bills, and we're going to start watching those a little more closely as well, since we do have a number of hospitals and other health-related businesses. The big one that people are watching is the single-payer study bill. It's does pretty much what it says it is. It's a study to look at single-payer. The way it's written, the outcome is pretty much predetermined. It'll be in support of single-payer, and that could obviously have some pretty serious consequences on how healthcare is delivered in the state. They could have some consequences to patients in terms of how services are rationed and that kind of thing. So that's when we're watching closely. And there's also some bills coming up that haven't been introduced yet, but we know are coming and that we're going to be concerned about. I know we have a number of charter schools in the members of chambers, and there is a charter school bill. It's still in drafting, hasn't been introduced yet, but reportedly it's going to impose a slew of new reporting requirements, financial disclosures, what policies are waived, a number of other requirements that have to be publicly posted, and if not, it gives local school board more authority to revoke a charter. So the gist of the bill from the draft I've seen is geared towards making it easier to revoke a charter or to deny a charter application in the first place. So that's one. Again, we're going to be working with a lot of our partners in the charter school community and in the wider business community on those ones. And finally, we do know there's going to be a new E-trip bill. You may remember a few years back, first it was a regulatory effort, and then there was a bill tried, I believe last year, maybe 2 years ago, what it wanted to do was put the onus on businesses to reduce their employees' vehicle mileage traveled. So instead of having your employees commute in by car, that it put it on the businesses to try and enforce limitations on how much they can drive, whether it's putting limits on each individual's vehicle miles traveled, limiting parking, requiring more access for bikes, that kind of thing. Again, we think the decision for how an employee gets to work ought to be left to the employee. It certainly shouldn't be left to the businesses to try and tell their employees they can't drive into work. But we do know that one's going to be coming. Now, it's not all bad news. There are a couple bills that we're supporting. The Sales and Use Task Force, Sales and Use Simplification Task Force has come up with a number of bills that we're supporting that further help to reduce that burden of our overly complex sales and use tax system. We have one of the most complicated in the United States, and we're getting there. We're getting to a place where it's a lot simpler. And there's a couple bills to bring the entire state into the SUT system, and to try and streamline some of the reporting requirements, some of the return requirements. So those are going through nicely. We're supporting those efforts. And the big one is construction defects. It's Senate Bill 106. The sponsors again are our very own Senator Zenzinger and Representative Byrd, along with Senator Coleman in the Senate. And this is an effort to kind of finally address the construction defect issue, which is, as any of you in the construction or the development or real estate industry know, there's a reason we don't have condos in this state, and we haven't had condos built for quite some time, at least not in the number that we really need to address the affordable housing crisis. And that's because of the ease of litigation and of frivolous litigation with construction defects. What 106 does is provides a right to remedy. So if a construction professional is notified of a defect claim, this provision gives the property owner the choice to either have the original contractor make the repair or to work with the original contractor to find somebody who can make the repair. And if there's problems with the remedial work, then they can determine how to proceed from there. But it doesn't automatically go to litigation. It also, as an informed consent provision, requires the consent of 67% of actual unit owners in a multifamily unit before litigation can go forward. And that's consistent with every other required vote under the Colorado Common Interest Ownership Act. And then finally, there's a negligence per se provision. So basically that says that if that no claim for negligence can be asserted or put forward if there was no actual damage to real or personal property. So a lot of times, a lot of these complaints are technical code violations that don't actually result in any harm. It's the equivalent of a T not being crossed or a I not being dotted. So saying those can't be taken to court. So all of this together provides a bill that if there are construction defects, they can still be remedied. We're not saying that if our builders build a home and the foundation, there's something wrong with it, that now to heck with you, we're it's built, deal with it. No, it's still allowing a right to remedy, but that right to remedy isn't automatically litigation, which of course has been driving up the cost of construction overall, and has just made the cost of building condos so far out of reach in this state that we simply haven't had any for quite some time. And that's affordable housing is probably, if not the biggest, one of the biggest issues at the Capitol this year. And there's a lot of different approaches to it. And it seems that a lot of the approaches down there are kind of adding to the cost of building, which, to a lot of us in the business community don't really see that as being the best way forward. This is something that constructively could lower the cost of housing in a very substantial way, and it's one that we're supporting. In fact, our very own Jamie Chavez is going to be down at the Capitol tomorrow to testify in support of that bill. We are having the coalition is having a press conference at 1:00 on the West Steps. If anybody wants to come down, you'd be more than welcome to join. So that's the gist of it. Those are the biggest ones we're watching right now. There's a lot of things going on down there in a lot of different industries. And as always, if anybody has any specific questions on any specific bills you run across, or you have an industry where your issues are a little more esoteric and you remember, feel free to let Jamie know or let me know, and I'd be happy to pursue some of those other bills for you.
Yeah, absolutely. People can always send an email or give us a call. I do have a question from Dave.
Sure.
Do we know what percentage of state lawmakers have run their own business and understand our issues? Good question.
That is a very good question. I don't know offhand. Actually, would be a good thing to look into. I do know, not to get partisan on this, but a lot of the majority, especially in the House, a lot of them not only have never run their own business, a lot of them haven't even come from the private sector. There's a lot of people, and there was a couple of articles in the Gazette, and I think the Denver Post this year, that talked about how for a lot of the representatives down there, this is the best job they've had. It's at $35,000 a year. They come from kind of the activist community. So yeah, no, I would say there's a large percentage, especially in the House, that have not run a business and haven't really even have a professional background that would give them that background going in. So again, that's why it's so important to have your voice down there and have you guys down there to speak with these people, because for a lot of these issues, taxation, business regulation, they just don't know. It's kind of academic to them, but of course what they're doing is not academic. It's real world. So
right, yeah, exactly. So how do you measure the success and effectiveness of our advocacy efforts? Like, what metrics do you use to evaluate outcomes?
Well, there's numbers. So I I have the bill report I send every week. It has our positions on it. So at the end of the year, obviously there's a straight mathematical, how many bills did we oppose that actually got killed, how many bills we support actually passed. Sometimes it's a little more complicated than that. There's a number of bills we may have opposed that we made much better. That's happened frequently over the last few years. And again, having that relationship, especially with, folks like Representative Byrd and Senator Zenzinger, they're instrumental down there in making fixes to bad bills. So, we kind of go through and yes, look at the ledger, how many we opposed that got killed, how many we supported passed, but also how many that we worked on did we make better? Did we, how many, are not as bad as they could be. I know that sounds almost a little macabre, a little grim, but that's just the reality of how things work down there. It's sometimes making a bad thing livable has to be a victory. So, but you can look at it that without the the advocacy of the business community, what would we be left with? Where would the state be? Where would we be on where would we be on sales and use tax if the sales use tax simplification task force didn't exist? We'd still be in the mess that we were in 10 years ago. So yeah, I think at the end of the year when I send a report, I think that's kind of what we're going to be looking at is what did we accomplish, what could we have accomplished, and what are we looking forward to next year.
Awesome, thank you. And a question from Wayne. Have you ever had to adjust your advocacy strategies in response to a changing political climate or unexpected legislative developments? Another good question.
All the time. Yeah, all the time. I mean, again, that's the advantage of having somebody down in that building because, things can change on an hour-to-hour basis. Sometimes committee members get switched out. It's happened several times where we'll spend a week lobbying the committee on a bill or on amendments or something, and then at the last minute, somebody swapped out for somebody else for various reasons. It happens a lot towards the end of the session. We're not the only people lobbying down there. There's some interests that may be opposed to ours that they're down there working as well, and sometimes you have to stay on top of things, and things change all the time. There's new information comes to light. Sometimes we have new information that can be a game changer. It's a constant when you said balancing act, it's almost like a dance. You have to. There's a lot of reacting. There's a lot of being proactive, and it's a very dynamic environment down there, I guess is the best way to put it. So,
yeah.
Short answer is yes.
Yeah. Well, we definitely appreciate having you down there on our behalf and making sure that we're staying on top of all of this. We just have a couple minutes left. Is there a message that you would like to convey to chamber members about the importance of engaging in the legislative process and advocating for these policies?
Sure. Well, I mean, I guess the best aphorism is that if you're not at the table, you're on the menu. And I think we've seen that, with several times. That's how a lot of organizations eventually get involved in government affairs because things have happened to them. They didn't have anybody down there. They weren't engaged in the process. And if you're not engaged in the process, then the process happens to you. So it's a lot better to be engaged early on and to try and have that influence instead of just having to react to whatever comes rolling downhill at you. So, yeah,
absolutely. Anything else that you want to say today?
Just how much an honor it is to represent the chamber. I love Westminster. I live in Cherry Creek, but I love Westminster. I love coming up there and seeing all your businesses and seeing all the growth happening up there. And I'm just really proud to be a small part of that. So thank you very much.
Yeah, you're welcome. Thank you for all you do for us. And thank you for joining us today. Thanks for everybody that tuned in. And I hope everybody enjoys the rest of your Monday and the rest of your week. Have a good one.
Thank you.